Welcome to the Skapa Podcast, Creating the Future with me, Michael Brasseur.
And me, Rob Murray.
The Skapa Podcast invites visionary leaders across government, academia, and industry, what we like to call the triple helix, to share their vision of the future unbound by current constraints.
And together what we're doing is wanting to explore what it's going to take to turn these visions into a reality. We want to discuss the necessary innovations, the strategic shifts, the collaborative efforts to genuinely bring about transformative change across defense and security.
And just to be clear, this isn't a podcast about the here and now or the past. It's all about the future and translating big, bold ideas into reality.
So with that all in mind, today we're absolutely honored to be joined on the show, on the Skapa podcast, by the Swedish Minister for Defense, Pål Jonson. Pål remains a key figure in shaping Sweden's modern security and defense policies, and indeed was very much central in helping Sweden ascend and have membership of NATO. Pål comes with a deep understanding of both traditional defense mechanisms as well as emerging technologies, and is absolutely at the forefront of making sure Sweden's armed forces are prepared for the future. Pål Jonson, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for creating that huge capability expectation gap. But I will do whatever I can to try to outline a little bit of Sweden's approach to defense innovation.
And Pål, it's great to see you again. Obviously, I saw you last month in San Diego, got you out on our autonomous boat and really gave you a deep dive on what we're doing at Scapa. So it's really great to see you. The first question for you is, how did you get here? What was your pathway to the Minister of Defense? And follow-up, how has that pathway shaped your vision for the Swedish Ministry of Defense?
Well, great seeing you again, Michael. And I must admit, it was much nicer to meet you in San Diego than it is in Stockholm right now, when it's -5 Celsius and cold and rainy. But so that meeting was very dear to my heart for many reasons, and very inspiring also to meet you at Saab Scapa. Just a few words on my own background and how I got engaged into this. So I started off at the Swedish Defense Research Agency. So I worked there as an analyst for 5 years, and then of course I was focusing on security and defense policy matters, but we worked door to door with the technologists and the operational analysts as well. So that was how I started my career, and then I worked as a staffer in political environments. I was chief of staff for European Parliament. I was a political advisor at the Ministry of Defense, and then I spent 4 years also at the Swedish equivalent to the NDIA, the Swedish Security and Defense Industry Association. And this was like in 2012 to 2016, and then we were quite inspired also about some of the work that Bob Work was doing actually on the third offset strategy, and we wrote some papers about that on the US focus already a decade ago, being focused on maintaining the technological edge. And after that, I became a legislator. So I was 6 years in the Swedish Parliament and served as vice chair of the Committee on EU Affairs, and then 2 years also as chairman of the Committee on Defense as well. So I have a mix between politics, industry, and academia. And I have a PhD from King's College from the Department of War Studies as well. So that's my background.
Wow, so that's fascinating. So you've really touched every aspect of the triple helix. How has that prepared you for this particular job, and how has it shaped your vision of the future as you try and make it a reality?
Well, I think having worked in the industry and together with companies, I think what I always say is we don't, in the government, we should not talk to the industry, but we should talk with the industry. So I think that could have been slightly conducive for my approach of working in the triple helix as well. And since I have an academic background as well, I haven't written any serious academic work in a long time, but I like to think maybe I'm academically informed and curious about some of the things that comes out of academia as well that possibly could be helpful. I think what you should be is not just about me, but it's the context that Sweden been operating during these last 2 years. And I was just lucky to be the Minister of Defense, but it was extremely transformative time for us as well, since we joined the alliance. And so we vividly remember I came into the US State Department, and this was like in March 2022, when it became clear that Sweden would apply for NATO membership. Then I remember it was a Deputy Undersecretary of State who said, "Yes, Sweden, you might be useful for innovation once you join the alliance as well. So we want to work with you there as well." So I saw this avenue that this is an area where Sweden as a new ally also could make a difference, not just for ourselves, but also something we could bring to the table within the alliance. And then, of course, we deepened our bilateral cooperation also with the United States. So I signed a defense cooperation agreement with Secretary Austin. We were quite early on traveling to meet folks over at the DIU in Silicon Valley. We went to DARPA. We also went to visit some of the other Center of Excellence that Europe has been very much engaged to when it comes to Diana. So we visited, of course, the Diana headquarters at Imperial College, and we went to Estonia, who also has a special area when it comes to aerial responsibility for Diana. We went to meet, we were inspired by other countries as well, particularly the US as well. So that helped in our outlook of, okay, let's put Sweden on the map and let's make sure that we can make a difference as a good ally, also ensuring that the alliance as such keep its technological edge.
Thank you, Pål. I mean, that's a really rich content, high answer there, covering a lot of ground. I want to pull on a few threads, if I may, because I really like the point you made with regards to the third offset strategy, a really fundamental bit of thinking that came out of Washington there. And also, your experience with regards to industry and technology, as you've just highlighted. Maybe we can talk a little bit about, when we think of Sweden's current defense strategy, what does that look like in broad terms? And how do you see the role of innovation and technology really shaping that strategy and pushing and driving it forward?
Sure. So what we normally say that Sweden brings to the alliance as such is, of course, operational depth, of course, ensuring the defendability of particularly Finland and the Baltic states and keeping the whole northern flank strong. Then we had the privilege actually of having General Cavoli in Sweden last week as well, and we always talk about what we can bring to the table also except for geography, and that's our capabilities, especially when it comes to the Baltic Sea. We've been operating below the surface, on the surface, and in the air for hundreds and hundreds of years, so we think we know that area inside out. And we also our subarctic capability, of course, up in the high north, where it's one thing, of course, to be able to survive there, but another thing also to fight. So those are some of the things we bring to the table. But we also bring to the table a strong defense industrial base. In terms of industrial output, we're number 6 within the alliance. If you look in terms of turnover and number of employed, it's quite unusual for a country of 10 million to have the ability to design and produce both submarines and fighter aircraft. And we have a broad portfolio of defense products that we actually produce. And that originates from somewhere. And I always say that comes from our STEM culture that we have in Sweden. Of course, we have a quite strong STEM culture when it comes to everything from being the home country of Ericsson, Spotify, Klarna, Volvo, and Scania, and so forth. So we have an engineering country. I think this is kind of unusual for a 10 million country. And if you look at some of the innovation metrics, we score quite well. I know we normally score top 3 in the world and also inside the EU. So being quite an innovative country. So you have a strong civilian R&D sector, and they have a STEM culture. You have a unique defense industrial base, being able to do, and we are new into the alliance. And Of course, now there is much more focus than there was a decade ago on maintaining the technological edge within the alliance. So I think those have been conducive in our thinking of what we could bring to the table as such. And of course, being from a 10 million country, we're always going to be exposed to an opponent is going to be quantitatively superior. So for us, it's very vital that to have the technological edge and to be qualitatively superior to any adversary that we might be exposed to.
Yeah, Paul, I really wanted to go just kind of one layer below that, because this is such an innovative country that's delivering capabilities. It's been a real strong addition to the alliance in terms of innovation. What is the source of that? And I've always, I was struck by your earlier answer about this curiosity, but what drives this innovation in your culture and in your nation?
Yeah, there's something to our STEM culture which I think is unusual. So we have a strong engineering tradition within Sweden. We have quite strong universities when it comes to math and natural sciences, which is absolutely vital for us as well. So I think it could be originating from that, which could be helpful. Our strong defense industrial base, in part, is of course a legacy from the time when we were military non-aligned or neutral during the Cold War, because then it was vital for us to have this kind of strong defense industrial base to make the military non-alignment credible as such. There's many countries who can build a certain section of an airplane, but to design this is unique, which also means that we and I think that the Swedish defense industry as well is used to operate with a client like myself with a small purse. So it has to be quite efficient also in project management as well. And so the design capability with efficient project management skills, I think, has been vital for at least for our defense industry. And of course, we have a quite big public investment into our civilian R&D sector. So we spend, I think we're number 4 in the world per capita. So we spend about 3% of GDP just on civilian R&D. And that's, of course, both from the private sector and the government sector together. So those things have been helpful for us.
So Paul, I want to pick up on maybe something which might be familiar to you. And we were talking just before the recording. My background, having worked at NATO in Brussels and in the British Army before that. Michael's background very much in the United States Navy before both of us working at Saab. And we have seen between us in different organizations the challenges that come when you're trying to actually adopt and implement new technologies, new ways of working, and actually bring about the change that is necessary to be able to protect our nations and the alliance and so forth. And so I wonder if this is something that you're seeing in Sweden about challenges to adoption of these new approaches, be they technologies or indeed ways of working, or quite frankly, business model innovations, and what you're doing about trying to address some of that.
Sure. I'm not sure you actually want to get me going here because I could go on for hours. But when I was at the DIU and privilege of meeting Director Beck, I asked him, so what's the most important thing if you want to do good on innovation and score well on this part? He said, my favorite expression is aggressively attacking bureaucracy at every stage. And okay, so we have the privilege of, in that regard, having a smaller bureaucracy than that they do at the DoD, but we also have a bureaucracy and we have a culture, of course, of very long acquisitions time and working everything from lowering the threshold for civilian companies to grab it into the defense sector, because we really need it right now to get more companies coming into our defense sector, bringing the talent from the civilian side and to be able to do things quickly. Another aspect, I think, which has been a source of inspiration for me has been during the war, I went many times to Ukraine, and I always say to my colleagues in Sweden, everything we do for Ukraine in Sweden, we do in weeks and we do in months. But everything we do at home, we do in years and decades. And, it's been quite big accomplishments that we've been able to obtain by delivering things to Ukraine, doing complex things like sending tanks and IFVs, artillery systems. But we've shown that it's possible to do things quickly. So I think a mindset of making sure that you have to take an element of risk in order to make things deliver quickly, I think that's absolutely vital. And then, of course, being inspired by all the great things that the Ukrainians themselves have been doing. And their ability to innovate, I think, has been vital for them in order to assure that they could handle the Russian full-scale invasion. So lots of inspirations to be found from our Ukrainian friends. When I visit Ukrainian companies, which I do frequently, they say we used to have 10 R&D projects a year. Now we have 10 R&D projects a month. We close down 8 out of 10 and so forth. But the agility that they have, I think, the propensity to take risks, I think, is absolutely vital. And of course, what is most important to my mind is if you want to be good in defense innovation, is you have to have a well-defined and articulate military problem that you should solve. And we all know that in wars you have lots of problems, and therefore you have lots of military problems. And I think that's been a source of inspiration for us as well in following what the Ukrainians have been doing.
I wonder if I can just follow up, Paul, on you mentioned a lot there, which absolutely resonates with me and my experiences working in various bureaucracies. And I want to come back to this point about risk and taking risk and actually creating the conditions whereby if you are working in an acquisition agency, whatever nation you're in, but in this case, obviously in Sweden, how can that culture start to be changed? How can we actually look at embracing risk-taking such that it is seen as a positive thing, not as a negative thing? Because I see certainly when I worked in Brussels, every NATO country had this same problem when it came to defense acquisition. And I just wonder if you can talk a little bit more about culture and risk.
Sure, a few things, because especially during times of reduction, and in Sweden we've been having pendulums going up and down. So we doubled our defense expenditures in 5 years. But that comes after decades of underinvestments. But that means that if you've been working in the armed forces for the last 2-3 decades, you've been focusing on downsizing and mitigating the consequences of that downsizing. And all of a sudden you have to take risks and you have to go very quickly. And how can you actually assure that? And sometimes you have an expression that say it's more important sometimes for people to not do the wrong thing than to do the right thing. And I think so that's one thing, of course, to reward taking risk, and also to when things go sour, and they will go, then me as minister, I will try to back up so they know, that I always tell them to take risk. Another thing is also the power of example, which is kind of important. So we had a year ago, I launched something called the Swedish Defense Innovation Strategy. We established a Defense Innovation Board based on the triple helix. We had a civil military program structures. That's great. But we also needed the power of example. So we did the skunk work, as to use the common US phrase for it as well. So I talked to the head of the Swedish Army and said, okay, what military problems do you actually have that we can solve by innovation? And I said, well, we're not doing drones well enough, and especially not doing swarms of drone well enough. So then we sat down, we talked to Saab, and Saab has a wonderful software on drone technology. And then we developed a program in 1 year that would normally take 5 years. It's not going to be perfect, but I think that was a strong message. And as a minister, I was involved throughout the process as well. And I found a great project manager who aggressively attacked bureaucracy, and we were able to do something in 5 years. We did in 1 year, and we're going to put it in the hands of the warfighter within 18 months. They're quite inspired by all the work that's being done. I know, Michael, you've been doing tons of things like this, of course, before when you were connected to to various projects as well. But inspired by the Americans, power of example, to see that you can actually do things much quicker. The key thing is, of course, to do things not sequentially, but you do things parallel at the same time as well. And then we were helped we have this quite strong ecosystem in Sweden for being this smaller country, because we work very closely with the Swedish Defence Research Agency, which is a body of about 1,500 people working on technology and defense innovation, and then we also have a strong procurement agency, and together with the industry and the people in the Swedish Army. So I think power of example, and as a minister, you have to be engaged into the process and put management attention on all levels to make sure things happen quickly.
Yeah, that's a fantastic example, Paul. And one of the premises of Scapa is that bringing all of these people together, swarming on a problem, accelerating new capability fast. I wonder what's got you most excited about the future for Sweden. A kind of wide open question here. What's excites you as you look forward to 5-10 years from now?
Well, I think, honestly, Michael, some of the things that you're doing in Silicon Valley, now when I did my military service, I was a Marine, so I spent a lot of time at the Combat Boat 90s. To see a Combat Boat 90, the design of that is actually made from the early 90s. To see that in San Diego and seeing the companies that you're working with and the amount of talent that you're engaging on the West Coast, and seeing how Saab closely interact with all the wealth of talent that are on the West Coast is a great source of inspiration for us. I think there's two things driving defense innovation so quickly. One thing is, of course, the war in Ukraine, with all the data coming in there as well, and all the military problems that's being dealt with. And the other one is, of course, how technology is galloping away exponentially as well, especially when it comes to AI, robotics, and also to autonomous systems in general. I think so embracing those possibilities that goes with this is absolutely key for us if we want to maintain the technological edge, because we know sooner or later our adversaries is going to be doing it as well. So I think those would be some of the key things. Of course, Sweden is, as smaller countries, for us is vital also with partnership and international collaborations, and reaching out also to other countries engaging into defense innovation.
And for our viewers, we had the minister in San Diego on one of his old boats, the CB90. We weren't sure if he was going to jump out and assault the beach. He looked like he was geared up, ready to do it, but we were autonomously sailing around San Diego Bay, and it was just a really special occasion for us, obviously, to host you, but hopefully for you to touch some of those old memories of your younger days.
Very good, very good. Well, let me. You just touched on something important there, Paul, with regards to those relationships with other nations, and I want to talk about the transatlantic relationship, obviously with the United States, and how is that relationship shaping Sweden's defense strategy and innovation priorities?
It's absolutely vital for us, and yes, to why we are slightly different from others is our design capabilities, and also we talk about the Gripen fighter, of course, that I'm sure you're obviously very familiar with if you're working at Saab. But that is, but just remember how the Alpha Bravo version has changed so much from the Gripen Echo that we're working on right now. So if we did a lot of R&D, traditional R&D, doing things by ourselves in the AB version, the Echo version, that's system integration, and that's international collaborations. And we would never be able to buy to design fighter aircraft if it wouldn't be for a strong MOU that we have with the US dating back to 1987. And the technology transfer that goes around across the Atlantic is absolutely vital for us as well. So I know there are ideas drifting around that we should make a single closed European defense market. market. I always tell people that would be bad, it would be expensive, and we'll all have to buy from it. To make sure that the flow of technology across the Atlantic and technology transfers, it goes two ways, I think is absolutely vital for us. And if you look at our defense industrial base, you see our primes are British owned or US owned entities such as BAE Systems, of course, BAE Systems Eglons, BAE Systems Bofors, GKN, and so forth. So it's in our DNA to work internationally and collaboratively and to work internationally. And we have, of course, very strong and deep collaborations with the United States, and that goes into some of the interagency works that's being done in the underwater domain. It goes on the government level, and it goes all throughout our militaries as well. So I think that's absolutely crucial for us as well. So I, of course, had the honor of having former Secretary Austin, first time in 23 years, he came as SecDef come to Sweden. We had former Secretary Del Toro, who went to Sweden several times and so forth. And we had General Cavoli last week. So having those transatlantic personal connections, I think, is absolutely vital as well.
Yeah, and you make quite a bit of trips over here to the U.S. as I recall. Can you share some of your highlights from those trips and some of the things that you take away after visiting Silicon Valley and various sites throughout the U.S.?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely vital. So I was at the Ronald Reagan Forum this year in Simi Valley, and then we went up to this time. Of course, we had the privilege of meeting you, Michael, down in San Diego. We visit RAND. We've been to DIU, and we have a lot of interactions across the U.S. as well. It's not just me, but a lot of my colleagues at the Ministry of Defense as well. So we try to reach out as much and listen and learn from people who have more experience than us as well. So that's some way we go about it. I was in my Japan just before Christmas, and then just before I met you, actually, I came in from Tokyo, and we visited their new defense innovation center that they're having there as well. There's quite similarities in the STEM culture between Sweden and Japan, actually, and there's a growing collaboration. So working internationally, I think, is absolutely crucial if you want to do innovation.
Pål, I wonder if I can change gears slightly and just get your thoughts on how we might think about production. And so I think there's probably maybe three core areas that we need to try to address when thinking about the future of defense, and innovation is absolutely part of this. Well, one is resourcing and making sure we got enough money to actually put into the system. The second is, even if we have enough money, we've got to make sure we can get it out the door through rapid acquisition and contracting and getting through the bureaucracy, as we kind of touched on earlier. But then the third element is that even if we achieve all of that, we've got to make sure we have enough production capacity. And I wonder how you're thinking about this in the context of new ways of maybe imagining production, and what some of the lessons might have come out of Ukraine and what you've seen that maybe reimagines how we address that problem.
Absolutely. And listen, Europe right now, we're not where we want to be when it comes to production capabilities. So a lot of focus, of course, has been on production of artillery shells and 155, and there's been some EU initiatives on this called ASAP to scale up production there. Listen, so our production capability is too low, and we need to have innovative approaches to this. But our production capabilities are only a symptom of customer behavior. That's because we as governments have underfunded defense investments, and we have underfunded our defense industrial base. And that's something we need to attack aggressively if we should ramp up production, because having a strong defense industrial base, that's part of credible deterrence now, especially when you have a war in Ukraine. In Ukraine is, of course, a war of attrition, and the war of attrition is a war of warehouses. So scaling up production, meaning, of course, that you have them to do a few things. Okay, so you have to harmonize requirements, kill your darlings, so to speak, in all the capitals, and you need to work much more diligently on standardization. And we as defense minister have not paid enough attention to standardization, because sending a strong demand signal to our defense industrial base so they can invest into their production capabilities. And that means more orders, more joint orders, and longer orders in order for us also to assure secured supply. But on balance in Europe, I'm not where I want us to be. I welcome everyone who wants to grab it into the defense market. And I meet some of the new companies on the civilian side. And we try, to lower the threshold to make sure that our acquisition cycles are much shorter and make sure that we don't put high fences around the defense market. So I think we need to change our approach to that. We also need to push our friends on the industry side, because so far I think they have ramped up prices more than production. So because I want the per unit cost to be lower at some stage as well. So I think those are some of the things that we've been focusing on the last 2 years. But this comes after decades of negligence and not paying enough attention to these things.
Yeah, and just very briefly, I one of the roles I had when I was in Brussels at NATO, I was the vice chair of NATO's Naval Armaments Group and also NATO's Army Armaments Group, and they were the entities that set the technical standards across the alliance, and it was always a challenge to try to get that workload and that engagement into a political context, and I feel that we're very much in that space now, and we are playing catch up. But no, thank you for your insights on there.
If I just could one thing, because there is a lot of ideas going on right side in the EU right now as well, and I think if we only had a Euro tank or a Euro drone or something like that, and I'm cautious about these great ideas to have a single consolidation as well, because as a consumer of defense products, I want an element of competition, and I think competition through excellence, through diversity and competition is what makes Europe great. And it's not by closing off Europe to the rest of the world, but it's collaborating. And of course, all our primes in Europe are working on third market exports and so forth. But I hear some political ideas that want to close off Europe and the EU from the rest of the world. And that's not going to help us to maintain the technology edge or getting the defense products that we really need to, that we so direly need to get.
Yeah, fantastic, Paul. Hey, as we've covered a lot of ground today, I wanted to kind of bring it back into one big idea. If you can do that, if there's one message you'd like to convey about Sweden's vision for innovation in defense, what would it be? If you could distill it down to one. And I know we've covered a lot of ground today, but just trying to.
Yeah, we want to play ball. And we want to play balls with partners, and we stand open for business. And you will find, if you come to Sweden and you will meet our talented engineers and our companies, I think you will find an interesting and inspiring business environment. So that would be my core message. We are doing whatever we can in order to put things in the hands of the warfighter as quick as possible, and therefore we need to create a strong STEM culture and a good defense innovation ecosystem, and we want to do it with partners and even better with allies. And now we have gone from having 31 partners to having 31 allies, and that means a lot to us as we have just joined NATO in 10 months. That would be my core pitch, I guess, on these matters.
Well, that brings us to time. Pål Jonson, thank you so much for being very generous with both your time, your answers, and your insights. Thank you for your leadership in this area. It's rare, if I may say, to have a minister who has your sort of background, that has worked and experienced across the triple helix and inherently understands these issues. And it's very clear to me that there's a huge passion there as well. So thank you so much for joining us on the show today, and have a great rest of your week. Thank you so much, Pål Jonson.
Thank you so much, Michael and Rob, and thank you also for what you're doing, and thank you for the Skapa Pod. And I'd love to go back to San Diego any day, Michael. It was wonderful last time as well.
You're welcome anytime, and we look forward to having you back.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for joining us on the Skapa Podcast. And don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join us next time when we will continue our discussions with leading voices across the military, academia, and industry.